Hello, everybody. This is Arjun Dev Arora, the founder and managing partner of Format One. We support founders and funders and help accelerate their efforts via people, capital, and strategy. And now off to John.
Hello, John Lowe here, co-founder at Format One, along with Arjun Dev Arora. I am the lead on executive coaching and communications facilitation. But enough about me. Today's guest, we have a wonderful individual. His name is Jack O'Halloran. I hope I pronounced it right. And I'm gonna let him introduce himself, tell us a bit about himself and what he's up to, and then we'll dive right into who Jack is, where he comes from, what's he been up to, what will he be up to.
Awesome. Hey guys, really appreciate you having me today. Have been looking forward to this conversation, and I am excited to be here. So my name is Jack O'Halloran. I'm the CEO and co-founder of SKALE Labs. We are the, team building the SKALE network, which is an open source, decentralized blockchain network. I can get into more of what SKALE does later. I've been doing tech startups for a while in Silicon Valley. Happy to get into that as well. But yeah, really a pleasure to be here today.
Thank you. So Jack, unless you are one of those preordained Dalai Lamas type of kids, I'm assuming you didn't grow up with the SKALE Labs vision in mind when you were 3 years old. Can you tell us a bit about what were your natural interests and tendencies growing up, and how did you find your way into tech eventually?
Yeah, it was not a direct path for me. I grew up in a small town in Western Nebraska. I didn't know anything about technology. Fortunately, I think my mom was a little bit of an early adopter and was always buying the latest Mac that was out, and I was playing Oregon Trail and Carmen Sandiego and the other games the kids of my generation played, where we got introduced to computers. But I never saw myself ever of having a career in technology, and came from a family of people who are in medicine or law. And that was kind of, if you, similar to a lot of people, I think, and, there's different categories and paths you could go down growing up in a place, not growing up in the Bay Area, for example, growing up in a small town in Western Nebraska. But I ended up going to school at the University of Nebraska, was pre-med and pre-law, trying to figure out which one I was going to do. And at a certain point, I was like, you know what? I think I'm going to do business. This sounds cool. I took a marketing class and I loved it. And it was so interesting because the marketing class was not this, binary one-dimensional thing of it was about people and humans and behavior and like perception and influence, and also about products and these hard components that are parts of these other, medicine and law. But it was, to me, a more interesting playing field. And I also liked the fact that I could just go start doing it after college, and I wasn't going to have to go to school for a lot longer. I could just go, play ball and get in the game. So that was kind of my path into getting into business. And, I was also a football player at the University of Nebraska, and I was a starter my junior year. I had aspirations my whole life of going to the NFL or being a pro baseball player or professional athlete of some sort. And I remember I had an injury, and I was like, you know what? I'm not going to go to the NFL. I better. And I knew that even if I did, I wasn't going to be a career. I wasn't going to retire off NFL money, and it wouldn't have filled this desire to go do something and build something and get into the business world. So for me, when I had this injury, I was like, you know what? This is my new North Star. I remember that day, and I was like, I have new goals, and had an uncle that lived in two uncles that, two of my dad's brothers both live in Silicon Valley, and got introduced to a guy named Bill Campbell when I was a senior in college, and I had no clue what I was going to do. And he's like, I learned about this whole career in technology, and I said, hey, I'm going to try to be like that guy. And that was kind of, long story short, ended up living in Palo Alto, and that was in 2005, and went from not knowing anything about tech to I'm happy to kind of get into the journey from there on forward. But that was those are my steps, and kind of how I somehow went from riding horses and shooting pheasants and scooping snow in Western Nebraska to coming into Silicon Valley.
Wow. There's a common thread there. You're using your hands and feet somehow. And I say that facetiously, but I don't joke. It seems like you grew up with a life where you really learned and grew by doing versus theorizing.
Yeah, I think one common thread, and this is something I picked up on, but also as I grew, I learned a lot more about this. But it was just like learning the art of learning, and sports taught me that, and school taught me that. It was like, okay, I have a goal. Let me sit down and figure out what things I can do and do well, and what are the things that if I do the best, I will have the best result. Instead of doing everything with equal effort, like how can I focus my learning to get really good at this and invest in failure? And then like, hey, I might strike out the next 4 or 5 times, but I know I'm using the right technique. And then, then eventually you start having success, and then you get exponential success. And, the same thing's true if you're studying for a test, right? You could read everything, or you could say, hey, like, this is what I know that I need to learn in order to score well at sports. And then the same thing I think holds true with business. And yeah, and it doesn't matter where you're from. And, if you have ambition, and I think like, a desire, and like a knowledge of how to learn, I think, that's a key to a lot of people's success.
Wow, that's so well said. And actually, perhaps that's something that our observation is it's not such a common skill either, because the way you just described it was you reverse engineered like an end in mind and how to get there. Whereas we see a lot of behavior where like it's just learning stuff for learning sakes, but without a clear outcome, or where's this taking me? And that has its own rewards, obviously. But it was interesting that you mentioned, how do I get there, right? And then what I need to learn, and what's going to get there get me there the fastest or with maximum success.
Yeah, and I remember it wasn't until I was like, I don't know, maybe I was almost 30 years old, and I read the 4-Hour Work Week, and then after that I read the Art of Learning, and before that, and a few months before that, I did a full distance Ironman. I didn't own a bike, I never swam, I never ran a marathon, and I was like, what? And I was in Japan, and I had one of my customers like basically talked me into doing this at like 2 a.m. at a bar. And he's like, you've got 5 months to train from today. I was like, I don't think I can run 3 miles. But so I was like, okay, like, let me look back at my experiences. What do I need to do? If I have good technique, if I can exert probably 1/5 the effort that most people would if their technique is not efficient. And like, I actually did it. I finished the race. It wasn't fast, but I did it. But I was like, wow, like I put these, I used what I learned. And then I read the 4-Hour Work Week, and then I read Art of Learning. I was like, I realized that was a playbook I could have been even better at, like, this model, because people are studying this and they're designing, mechanisms for learning and being efficient and investing in failure. So, yeah, but you're right. I think a lot of people don't do it, but everybody has the aptitude to, right?
Totally.
Wow. Anything you want to add to that, Arjun? I just sidetracked the conversation, but
no,
I have a
that's
marker
amazing.
of 2005 in my mind.
Yeah, so we'd love to pick it up from there. And obviously, you were introduced to Bill Campbell. You ended up in Palo Alto, and got and began your journey in the tech ecosystem, the kind of Silicon Valley startup world. And so, would love to hear kind of how things progressed once you landed there, and who helped you, how did you build from there, and how did you end up to where you are today?
Yeah, I mean, waking up one day in Palo Alto after being in Nebraska and other places in the world is so we're asking a question post reorientation geographically.
You know what? And so what I'll give you I'll move the story back one step, because I flew out to Santa Clara. I ended up getting this job, but they said, hey, we just opened this office in North Carolina. Will you move there? And I'd never been to North Carolina, didn't know a single person in the state. And like, but if you do really well, we'll move you out to California in 3 to 6 months. So I was like, okay, sounds like a good deal. And so anyways, I end up doing an inside sales, lead generation, or SDR, BDR type role, selling software for a company called Good Technology. And I wasn't selling, I was just opening up leads, right? And qualifying. And I went from like, being this high profile football player who everyone knew in Nebraska. And then the next thing, I'm like in a cubicle, I'm just making 75 calls a day, getting people hanging up on me. I was the lowest person in the totem pole in the company. and I was just shy to even talk on the phone the first, and I was just getting hung up on, and everyone's making fun of you, if you have a bad call. I was just like, and I remember I called my mom. I was like, what am I like this? I'm horrible at this. And she's like, you know what? Sounds like you just don't know how to do it. Go buy a book or something. And I remember I went and bought like Selling 101 or Selling by Phone 101. I read this book. I was like, oh my gosh, this is like how you do this. And ended up my first full month, I did double what anyone had done before on the job, because I was like, okay, I'm just gonna apply all these techniques I'm learning. And I heard other people like, they're not using any techniques. They must have not read these books. And it was an advantage. And ended up got moved out to Palo Alto, and it was just really fortunate too to have a lot of good mentors at Good Technology that really helped me both in sales and in other categories. And the founder of the company and the CEO and lots of the top salespeople, it was a really great place where people, I think, took time to educate younger people. So that was one of the most fortunate things that happened. And then, Good had a successful exit to Motorola, stuck around there for a while. And then the founder of the company, a guy named Joel Jewett at Good, who had become a mentor of mine. And I started working for him, doing business development and product management work and kind of engineering coordination, getting and learning the other part of the house. He said, you should start a company. And I was like, yeah, that's what I was thinking of doing too. And ended up starting my first company in 2008 with 3 other people. And it was called Incentiline. It was a digital currency for resource allocation in an enterprise. So NASA was the first customer.
Wow.
We had these like NASA bucks. You could like buy wind tunnel time or supercomputer time. And there's this whole supply demand curve that balanced pricing. And what it did is create these natural, resource allocations, because people were like, well, I don't really need it. I'll wait 2 days later. I'll wait 4 days later. And I think it was a phenomenal idea that met the buzzsaw of the 2008 economic collapse. And then here we were like, okay, we've all quit our jobs. No one's buying this anymore. All the implementations are stopped. We're like, well, let's go back to the drawing board. And we ended up, taking that team and the premise of that engine and built a company called Aktana. And almost every pharmaceutical rep or biotech rep in the world is guided through this analytic platform today. And almost anybody who's, been given a prescription or gotten a medical, like a cancer oncology treatment, in some way, shape, or form, the healthcare professional was impacted and informed and interacted with this technology. So it was a cool kind of turn of events, and then to grow and go through that phase. And that was kind of my next chapter, like going from slugging it out and kind of growing up the ladder at Good to then, being able to start a company and like have new failures and new learning lessons and I've loved it. It's been really fun.
Wow, amazing! Congratulations on Aktana and the team for taking it. So that was quite transformational. I mean, that you're talking about something that impacts like a broader ecosystem there.
Yeah, it was. And I'll tell you, I learned so many lessons, and so did my colleagues and co-founders. Like we learned a lot through the process, and I think we would have been so much more efficient and effective earlier had we have gone through an incubator and accelerator program. And that's a good thing about those types of programs. You're getting really close mentoring and coaching, and we were just kind of reading blog posts, talking to people, figuring it out. And it's not the most efficient, effective way to learn, but we eventually got there. And we're also early. We were this is all AI, machine learning technology, and no one even called it that, right? It was just advanced analytics or predictive analytics. And we'd go sell this to people, and they'd say, okay, so you're here telling me that I should have my sales reps listen to a machine and a computer to tell them who to call and what to talk about? Like, get out of here. Okay. Like they're not going to like that. We go by gut. We know who to sell to. We know our territories. I see a lead, I know what to do. And I'm like, yeah, maybe your best reps do, but what about 90% of the team? And even the best reps, why should they waste so much time digging through spreadsheets when they could, this is like human computer interaction for synergy. And it was really interesting seeing that progress. And also when I was at Good, I had a chance to see mobile progress. And then I got to see this machine learning AI space progress. And now I'm working in blockchain. And I have to tell you, there's a pattern. I just see this pattern And I'm excited about blockchain because, again, it's another disruptive technology. I think that's a huge future. And I just see a lot of the same parallels, which was what got me interested.
Yeah, wow, super excited to dive into those patterns that you noticed because, as you were talking about, pre-labels of machine AI for, this application and people saying, what, I should listen to a machine to tell me who I should call. But nowadays we think, of course, right? Like, there's just so much, and it's not just for sales, it's for customer success and all these other things, right? So you're at the front of kind of an inevitability in the marketplace, so to speak there. What are the patterns you see there that you've translated or kind of noticed in the blockchain space now? Because I think now we're going into territory that leads us a bit more to SKALE Labs and the broader vision, and super excited for you to unpack that for us.
Yeah, so I'll give you an example. I'll start first in mobile. Good technology was mobile computing, and the reality was there's one killer app. It was email. Okay. And then text messaging. Okay. On a smartphone, those are the two things you could do. If you tried to use any applications that any memory requirements, high throughput requirements, bandwidth, battery life, it just didn't work. Like a message is okay because you can send it, and then if it sends later, you don't really know, it's very light. It's a packet. It just goes through. But if we want to play a simultaneous game, if we want to use a high compute power business application, right? You just couldn't do it. And so almost every Fortune 500 company used Good at that time. And it was, if you had an application you wanted to get on mobile, that's where you would go. You'd go to Good and BlackBerry. But you know what? No, none of these nothing ever worked. No one did anything because the device speeds were slow. The bandwidth was horrible, et cetera. And then, fast forward a few years to 2009. And I think Apple very smartly was like, well, here's the speed. Like, we're going to wait. We're going to time this well when all the other infrastructure comes together. And they did. And the iPhone came out. And soon after, 3G arrived and compute and battery power, et cetera, all came together at the same time. And then, and it really exploded. And you look at AI and machine learning, this was not a technology issue. Okay. Like Moore's law was in a pretty good place. Algorithms were all not a new thing. Like the algorithms that most people are using for these things are not that complicated. What the issue was about the human side of this and human technology acceptance. And this was a little different, but it was, people had to get comfortable with this new social dynamic of interacting with computers and getting guidance. And also, when you use AI, you also have to dirty data in, dirty data out, garbage in, garbage out. And so there was just a lot of things that had to change. And, so I saw, and then, people start getting wins. And then, and again, it's the low hanging fruit. And then you start getting into disruptive categories. Then you start getting into these really interesting growth categories. And I see the same thing, both those dynamics happening at the same time in blockchain, where the technology is coming together just as the mobile piece did with all these different combined parts. The human societal acceptance piece is coming together. It's still kind of far out there, but you would have tell somebody in 2005 that you're never going to take a taxi again and just anybody can just start their own business and drive their own car around and drive you around and you'll be comfortable and safe doing so. They'll tell you you're crazy, right? So these things feel a long ways out and then they happen quick. And so I see those things happening with blockchain and I'm excited about it. And it's similar patterns, both from technology readiness and societal acceptance.
Wow. And so even with blockchain, what do you see have been some great accelerants to societal adoption that has in fact helped you and other innovators in the space really pursue building the pipelines of infrastructure with more support, resource, whether that's capital, human support, and community support? Would love you to talk through some of those things.
The interesting thing, a lot of journeys aren't smooth, and that's the case for blockchain. So, and it's frictionful, and it's friction because there's some things that move the ball forward and other things that move the ball backwards, and they happen at the same time. And so people have been able to make a lot of money and participate in these nascent products, which stimulates growth, which floods more venture capital down to good entrepreneurs and good teams that are starting businesses and finding product market fit. But conversely, there's been like graft and like not good KYC AML practices and like bad branding for like hackers using Bitcoin and as a means to like capture their, their ransom or whatever. And then also there's been like just fraudulent efforts and like these fake hype things that try to capture that money and that growth. And so while the ball is getting pushed forward, it's also getting pushed back. And I think that's common, but I've never been in an industry that's been so dramatic with like the swings or the motions back and forth. And so I think the industry is just but it seems like one of these things where you look at the value of mobile computing, you look at the value of AI and machine learning, you look at the value of ride sharing and the gig economy and the share economy. And then I think you look at the user owned economy or, profit sharing communities and, community owned software products like co-ops that are your ride sharing company. And, it just seems to me like an inevitable thing where you can, through smart contracts and open source software and essentially blockchains, create new rails, rules, and governance for the way we use software systems. And it's like water flowing downhill. It's like gravity is inevitable. And it just, who knows how fast it will get there. Hopefully it hits a nice stream. And, but right now there's just a lot of friction but we're close. We're really close still. I think in the next, 1 to 2 years, we'll start seeing those breakout years. But that's why it hasn't happened yet is all of the technology issue combined with friction in the space. But, for people that really are perceptive and either want to start a business in the space or invest in it, it doesn't take much effort to see the like real kernels of value. And that's where the promise is.
Oh, thanks for sharing that. And so like, tell us a bit about, as you're talking about these broader trends and inevitabilities within the crypto space and its opportunities, where does SKALE Labs fit present day, and where does it want to fit in the future?
Yeah, so I'm gonna speak pretty high level here because I think getting in the nuances of cryptography and infrastructure, like we can do that. There's a lot of content if you want to hear me talk about that, but I'm going to speak, kind of macro architecturally. So blockchains are shared databases. And what it is it creates one database, okay? And imagine if Uber, Google, Twitter, LinkedIn, Salesforce.com all use the same database and they had to share it. Imagine, and like all of a sudden, it's end of quarter and Salesforce is just, and it costs more to send your email, or, something's trending on Twitter and it, your email's slowed down, right? And imagine the cost of running this where everybody's data has to be stored on everybody else's system. It's not efficient. And that's not the way the internet's built. The internet is like these little, mini databases with weak links talking to each other. And so what SKALE builds is a large pool of these nodes or computers that work together, and they can be randomly assigned into these subgroups, maintaining the security properties of blockchains, but then giving each application, like the email application, the rideshare application, the decentralized finance product, the games, like each application gets their own blockchain that's actually in a unified pooled security model. And so what it is we're replicating this infrastructure of the internet and then bringing the Ethereum ecosystem, which is the top developer tooling and code and just developer ecosystem, hands down in blockchain. You can bring that into every single chain, your own blockchain, and then also work interoperably back and forth with the Ethereum mainnet, which is the big shared database. It has a lot of value as well to have the big shared database, because that's where you get this one source of truth forever about who owns what. And so what SKALE does is SKALE is actually uses Ethereum to run the SKALE network, and it works back and forth with Ethereum to help developers have a future experience. And a lot of people say, they think it's like how many transactions per second, the speed of transactions, and those are nice things, but it's actually stepping back a little bit. It's more about giving people the architecture to then create a Web 2-like experience across the entire Web 3 internet. And that's our goal, not just, solve this one acute issue that's, present today, which people like to talk about, which is throughput and transaction time and transaction cost.
Wow. Wow. This is a lot. And thanks for sharing that. Wow. And with Scale, how did you come up with the name then, as it
You know
speaks
what?
to what you just discussed?
So Stan Kladko, my co-founder, and I, who has a very long track record in Silicon Valley too, and we even crossed paths a few times where he did the cryptography certification when I was at Good. He ran a crypto lab for a while. He and I were just like going back and forth on what the name should be, and we had all these different ideas. And I remember I lived in the Presidio at the time in San Francisco, and I was running trail running on the coast because I lived right out near the coast, and I was listening to a podcast. I was listening to Chris Dixon and on Adam Draper's podcast, who Adam Draper is now an investor in Scale with Boost VC, but they use the word scale about, I bet 200 times in that podcast. And afterwards I called Stan. I was like, hey, we should call this Scale Zen. And he's like,
Okay.
stupid. Developers like short words. We're going to call it Scale. I was like, okay. So that was the story. And it makes sense for search to use a different letter. If you type in SCALE blockchain, there'll be like 10,000 results. You'll never show up. But if you type in SKALE, and then SKALE Labs was a nice way to name, the corporation that supports the network, which is a Scale network. So that was the origination there. And our goal of the community is to scale blockchain so we can have hundreds of millions and maybe even billions of users using blockchains.
Wow, that's absolutely amazing. And for the everyday person, right, who's not so clued with the building of blockchain applications or building in this space, how does my life look different as Scale achieves what it sets out to achieve?
Yeah.
What are the implications for everyday living?
Okay, I'll try to give 3 examples. One, let's talk about a bank account, a savings account. Right now, all of our savings accounts are run by banks, and there's brick and mortar institutions and insurance, all these, people and marketing and sales and then these banks are taking your money and then they're doing all these other crazy things with it, right? Through the economy. And there's just a lot of middlemen, okay? And what banking looks like in the Ethereum world that we're trying to help build in the blockchain world is there's no bank. The blockchain, this shared asset run by all of these servers, is the ledger that secures everyone's money. And right now, like Bitcoin is very clear, like, yeah, I can, a ledger, it just keeps our money and it does a great job at that. But in the Ethereum ecosystem, you can incorporate these smart contracts, which are really computing properties. And all of a sudden I can have a checkings account. I can have a savings account. I can have like these really highly complicated financial instruments for trading. And so it's like, and guess what? There's no brick and mortar. There's no middleman. We can cut the middleman out and then your returns are going to be dramatically higher than what you're getting with banks. So that's one example. Okay. Another example would be, let's go to like the deep end of Web3. Let's say Facebook, Google, Uber. And if Uber is maybe not a good crossover Web3, but all 3 are incredibly strong network effect companies that get stronger. And then now we have these 3 central players that are taking more value than they give back to the community. And I mean, if Google's making 100 billion a year off search and like taking our data and selling our data and buying our data and kind of manipulate, like you say something and next thing you know, you're getting retargeted on Instagram and, all these, and Arjun, this world well, right? And hey, it was really good and valuable to get us to this state. But imagine if we as the users owned the product and the code was open source so we could all see it and we could vote on how those ad dollars are shared back through the community, and we could opt in or opt out to how our data was leveraged and monetized. And if we want to opt into to monetization, we actually get to recoup the benefits. That 100 billion probably goes down because the ad dollars will be lower. Maybe it goes up, I don't know. But if it goes to 50 billion, then you share 50 billion, 30 billion across all of the people who just use the product. And you have another 20 billion you can give to all the people that run the service, okay? And the same thing's true if we take Uber and we remove Uber and we use open source code and smart contracts, and I go, catch a ride, that 30% Uber takes gets split between the driver and the rider and the people that run the servers and write the code. Brain Trust is an example I think you guys have talked to, where instead of having these middleman recruiting companies, they let the companies work directly with the talent, and they do it for no cut, and they just make sure you use B-Trust as the fee component. 10% of whatever the transaction is, you have to pay a fee in B-Trust, okay? And that goes back to the community. And so when you have a cryptocurrency and a blockchain and an open source product, you can do amazing things as far as community growth, governance, profit sharing, et cetera.
Wow. So wow, that helps. Thanks for taking us through that journey, Jack. I mean, because now I've started to think like, wow, so Brain Trust is literally just the beginning, and we can expect many more versions of Brain Trust with different core value drivers floating around the ecosystem.
But and then I want to add one last thing here, just to anybody, if this is one of your first times hearing about Web3 business models or user-owned economy. What I'll say is the one of the problems blockchain has is that there are uses for it everywhere. It's like the internet. And that's why a lot of people are like, hey, it's Web3 or the open internet. And so what it means, it ends up being a really big product marketing issue and awareness issue, because to some people, blockchains are these enterprise things that help big companies move money around the world. To other people, it's supply chain software. Other people, it's like the next rails of the gaming world. Any gaming will be using blockchain and, non-fungible assets that can be sold across these tokens and smart contract, provable gaming. Other people are like, no, it's all about finance. It's about money. It's about, being bankless. It's about removing middlemen. Or other people are like, hey, this is Web3. Let's go into these middleman heavy network effect businesses and create community-owned properties with open source code and smart contracts. And so it's a lot of things to a lot of people, which is also speaks to, I think, the potential growth, but also one of the reasons why we're having challenges, because nobody knows how to describe it. And even the people that work in the space have trouble agreeing on what it is.
Wow, that's so well said. And the idea, it's almost like these are the implications of operating in a decentralized fashion, where if you look historically, we don't have an architectural precedent to say what it is like. You can't translate a metaphor to whatever, something Socrates did or something back in the day. But would love for you to speak more about how you came to understand or get into this mindset of what decentralized actually means and its implications, and how you see other people start to familiarize themselves with what that actually means. Because I think we're still in arguably a discovery phase, are we not?
We are. And I think there's also a spectrum of decentralization too, and how much user owned something is. And also it's also a path and a journey. And I think what a lot of the smart people in the space that I've been talking to, and this is also my opinion, is you don't want to start on day one with complete, community ownership. You just won't get anywhere. You need to be more centralized. And over time, you start giving more and more power. And so the rails have to be there. And the good news is that it's very clear of who has what power because of the way smart contracts work and because of the nature of open source code. And so, you can look at any of these products, and you look at Scale, for example, where anybody can show up and run a server and add it to the network. And, let's say we want to change the pricing. And so all these developers that are building, blockchain games and blockchain business applications, blockchain finance applications, et cetera, can all use Scale as their database. Let's say the people that run the servers are like, we need to get paid more. It's like in the example of the Uber driver, like, hey, we need more money. And the rider's like, we want to pay less. Well, guess what? They can actually vote, and anybody who has tokens can vote to change the price. And then we're like, okay, I guess the price changes. And it literally happens automatically through smart contracts. There's a proposal of the contract that codifies the business logic, and then people vote. And if it passes, it literally just happens. It gets upgraded. And so that is like a really amazing level of decentralization that's really clear. Now, if you started there the first day, you have to organize. Right now, there's 4,000 people staking in the Scale network. There are 150 validator nodes. There's 46 validator orgs. And so in 6 months, the first on-chain votes are going to start. But in the next couple of weeks, like months, it's like you need a hot fix, like boom, boom. Like you need to have more agility during the early days. And the Scale network just launched October 1st, right? In its live decentralized form. But so you just take these graduated steps to get there, fix all the bad issues, move to the next phase. But it is, we're in experiment zone. Best practices are being formed now. And I think we're all learning, which is also exciting.
Wow, so well said.
Yeah.
And, I like that idea of like, you start with degrees of decentralization and move along with the benefits. And, building something like Scale that has such huge implications. I mean, blockchain obviously itself has huge implications on society. How do you see yourself moving or bringing old industries along, like the banking system, because it can be seen, they're obviously freaking out and it can be seen as a threat. But if you look long term, right, there's a way for everyone to win with this new technology. Could you speak a bit more to that?
Yeah, so I forget who coined this term, the white hot center. It's in one of the famous business books. That means like it's really your low hanging fruit, right? And it's your like Jeffrey Moore crossing the chasm first bowling pin. Okay, like that's your white hot center. Some people say sell Bibles to the Christians. Your sales will be better, right? Than trying to change people's religion. Okay, and so when you look at blockchain, it's gaming and decentralized finance right now. Those are the two big categories. But you know what? There's a lot of other ones right behind those. And so I think there are people that are out trying to like change people's religion, sell different manuscripts of religion to people who don't practice that religion. And to be honest, they're just not having much success. Now, maybe their tokens are really valuable, but if you look at the activity on their blockchains, it's pretty empty. Okay. And that's another cool thing about blockchain. You can actually see business traction because you can see how much information is in the blocks of usage. So these are called ghost chains. There's a lot of billion-dollar ghost chains out there. But then you look at the Ethereum network and there's so much use and it's just the early days still. And the network's still getting jammed. That's why Scale is building and other, Ethereum's moving to ETH2. And there's all these really good things that are happening. But I think, we have to find the white hot center, and then the other pieces just get pulled along in the vacuum.
Oh, thank you.
Awesome. No, just really appreciate it. And looking at time here. And, I think maybe as a quick last question, as you look out to the next, 5 or 10 years, where do you see Scale and the impact that it will be able to have? And then, would love to just hear that quick answer as we wrap up.
The goal of the Scale community is to make the user own node economy. And it would be amazing to see 10,000 nodes in the Scale network or 100,000 owned by thousands of different operators and running, the majority of the world's smart contracts and really helping a positive movement for users and governance come together from a societal perspective, as well as a financial perspective for all the new small businesses that will get up and running, people that are running servers that have, other products and assets and services they sell in and around this network. And I would love to just see this flourishing ecosystem that, and at the end of the day, it's all about making developers successful. And if that happens, then I think a lot of good stuff will happen for a lot of people. And, that's our goal.
Oh, thank you. And probably one last question to give Scale an opportunity and a plug for anyone, for anyone out there who's looking to get into blockchain or is aligned with the Scale vision. What would you like to share with them? And what sort of people do you look for the SKALE Labs team?
Yeah, so I recommend go to scale.network. That's the website, skale.network. You could follow me on Twitter at Jack O'Halloran, or find me by going, through the SKALE website or Telegram or Discord if you use those products. But yeah, just come to the website, check it out. It's an open source community. It's community owned. SKALE Labs Inc. is just one of the, we're the founding team, but there's open source contribution happening. If you're a developer, please check out the documentation. And yeah, come get engaged. And I think also welcome you to come check out the Ethereum ecosystem, because SKALE is just one component of that broader ecosystem and community. And I think it's a lot of fun and a lot of passionate people trying to build the future of the internet.